If I were in a novel, I wouldn't be the hero. I wouldn't have the grand romance or conquer mighty foes. I wouldn't be the villain and hatch an evil plan. I wouldn't be the rebel. I wouldn't be the wise man. I would be the nameless clerk, a shadow passing by, unnoticed in the milling round, among the faceless crowd. If I were in a movie, I'd have no lines to say. I'd be out of focus, in the distance, on the edge of frame. I would be the background, a shadow passing by, unnoticed in the milling round, among the faceless crowd. If I were a magician and could really disappear, not a soul would notice, and none would shed a tear. If I were to vanish, it would bring no joy to an audience of no one, no witness to the void.
When I was 10 years old, I was in grade 4 at Golden Point Primary School, and at the nearby youth centre, judo was being introduced. So I went along just to have a look at it, and my parents at the time thought it might help me control my temper. And I just took to it straight away, and it's remained just a fascination with me. From judo, I expanded to karate, and from karate to kendo, and from kendo to iaido, so that I've taken in quite a number of different martial arts over my lifetime so far. Martial arts were quite the exotic experience way back then. We're talking 1964. So most of the primary school sport that we did was football or cricket. And so to do something different like judo, it was quite outrageous, really. And some of my family, my uncles in particular, had long memories. So to do judo was a bit of a challenge. But as I said, I just took to it. It was something very fascinating about it. I think initially the thought of being able to right some wrongs, to stop bullies in their tracks, to stop people doing the wrong thing. So I had at an early age, I think I had a very self-righteous attitude. And judo, I think, was going to help me right all the wrongs in the world, as you see them as a young primary school child. Normal day life at school, at high school, you were bullied. I think we just thought it was the natural pecking order, the way you sorted things out. So yes, I was bullied. I think I had as many scraps as anyone else in the schoolyard. There's been one or two incidents where I've stepped in. Martial arts certainly gave me a lot of confidence to do that. So yes, there have been occasions, but not a lot. I didn't teach my children martial arts initially. There's an old Okinawan tradition where you give responsibility for teaching your children to a trusted friend. So they began karate with a good friend of mine, Sensei Graham Howard. After 2 or 3 years, they started to lean towards what I was doing. I was more involved in kendo. And they both took up kendo with me, and there were no other teachers about, so I taught them kendo from their beginning. Kendo is a very important part of what I do. It's a very important thing that it helps define who I am. It's made me more aware of the people who come to kendo and train with me. It's given me a very strong sense of my limitations, but it's also helped me develop some resilience, and it's given me the ability to keep going. So after 35 years, I'm still doing kendo, and I get a lot of personal self-satisfaction in competing against the youngsters, but also some of the much better martial arts people than myself. Iaido is a branch of kendo, and it's an activity that you do basically on your own, and you're trying to perfect the use of the sword. You can never perfect it. There's always something you can polish or embellish. So you keep trying to reach that state of perfection and awareness. And it's something, as I get older, I continue with even more vigour, because it's enabled me to think a lot more philosophically about the journey I've been on and where it's leading me. All martial arts have things that are in common. As one Japanese sensei said to me, kendo and iaido are wheels on the same cart. The Japanese martial arts, which I concentrate on, all talk about the individual, they all talk about resilience, they all talk about developing the person. So we try to develop, apart from the skills involved, virtues. We call it butoku, martial virtues. Things like loyalty, resilience, integrity, things that everybody should aspire to. And you can achieve these things through martial arts. It really depends on the teacher that you're involved with. So the different martial arts of karate, kendo, iaido, kyudo, all the Japanese martial arts offer that opportunity. Unfortunately, in this day and age, a lot of that philosophy is being lost with mixed martial arts and what have you. But the teachings are there, and the way forward is if you are willing to look. I've been to Japan 9 or 10 times, always to train, but I've also been able to fit in some sightseeing and social get-togethers. I love the country. I feel always feel safe when I go to Japan, no matter what time of day or night. The people are so polite and so supportive. On the dojo floor, when you start training with Japanese people, it's a different expectation, however. You are expected to put in. You are expected to try as hard as you can, and no quarter is given. So that when you really train hard and you feel like you're exhausted and you just want to sit down and have a rest or fall down, you're pushed, and you suddenly realise you've got more reserves and you've got an inner strength that you didn't have. And that's something you don't readily find in the West. So my trips to Japan have been very important experiences. They've been life-changing in many respects. And I've come away from some very hard training sessions and seminars feeling like I've really achieved and done something. I haven't received bits of paper or gradings. I've just come away thinking that was unbelievable. So I take things that I think are useful and important, and I do pursue them. And talking to older Japanese masters in kendo in particular. Some of these people are really insightful. They do have wisdom and they are very humble, but they encourage and they make me train hard, and they also make me find things that I didn't think I was capable of. And they pass that on, and no reward for them, only that they've helped somebody along the way. And that in turn is something I like to try and do, help people along the way. My parents were both country people. My father was born in the Wimmera, a little place called Japarrit, and my mother was born in Casterton. They met in the late 1930s, and they had a romance going when war broke out, and my father went to Darwin, where he was stationed for the duration of the war. And on his first leave, 4 years after being posted up there, they married. This was 1944. And they lived very happily together in Ballarat until they were both in their 80s, and they passed away within 6 months of each other. As I was growing up, it was a very free and easy upbringing, I think. We came inside late at night when it got dark, so we're fairly adventurous. My father was a travelling salesman with the Nestle company, and when he was home on the weekends, his time was largely taken up with the local football club, where he was a vice president. So my mother did most of the upbringing, and I think she had a very Scottish upbringing, which had quite an influence on us. The people who had the most influence on me, though, I think, apart from my peer group, would have been martial arts people. It wasn't the formal Japanese martial arts in the early days. Judo in the 1960s was very much an Olympic sport, and the rank of the instructors we had in Ballarat were around about first dan, so they were only just beginning themselves. In karate, I was very fortunate in that when I began at the age of 16, most of the people who were instructing me were in their early 20s. So as I grew over a 10-year period, they really helped me go from adolescence into early adulthood. And those friendships which we forged back then have kept with me my whole life. So that now that I'm in my early 60s and they're in their early 70s, they're really helping me make the adjustment from middle-aged to late middle-aged. My father had a very simple philosophy of life. And I think if you asked him what his philosophy was, he really would have said he didn't have a philosophy. But the main thing that really defined him was his love of sport. He played A-grade cricket, played A-grade football, and when he retired, as most footballers and cricketers do in his late 20s, he took up lawn bowls. So sport was the big driving interest in his life. But paradoxically, the things he said to me at various times, while they were sport orientated, they were very sensible, and there was a very common human side to them. For example, if I was doing something wrong, he'd come out with something like, "Come on, son, play the game," or "Be a sport." So it was sport orientated. But I think what he was saying was, there's no need to jump up and down, there's no need to act the fool. Everybody has to get on together, so we all play by the rules. And if everybody does the right thing, everybody can enjoy what they're doing together. So that simple philosophy, or that simple take on what was happening, really stood by. And so I think I got from my father, you don't have to sit at the feet of the sage on the top of the mountain after climbing all the way up there. And you don't have to read a number of books by some very talented, very insightful people. It can be very simple, but it can be very meaningful. I don't believe I could have done anything differently. Certainly there have been times when I felt as we all do, in hindsight, we should have been wiser. We could have hoped for a better outcome. This can be in your love life, your professional life, your family life. But things happen and you just have to deal with them. Sometimes you have to roll with the punches and move forward. Perhaps I would have liked to have gone to Japan a little bit earlier. Perhaps concentrate on my profession a little bit more strongly. To be honest, I'm quite satisfied with my life so far. And if things haven't gone well, a person should be able to walk away, no regrets. Life is our own conscious observation, awareness and understanding of the world and how we experience and see it. As we get older, we perceive things differently. Yes, we do become a little bit wiser, and we do become a little bit accepting of the things that happen. But when your time comes, when your life finishes, life is over. It goes on for other people, but as life as you perceive it finishes. So life is a very personal thing and seen through your own eyes. You can share some perceptions and understandings with other people, and you can come across some very like-minded people. But basically, life is your own journey. I would really like my children and my grandchildren to remember me as a very fun-loving, warm, intelligent person who cared deeply for them and who had a sense of humour which is passed on. I've seen that sense of humour in all of them so far, and we all get together and we all enjoy having fun together. So if they can remember me, if there's a legacy, it's that sense of humour. It's being able to step outside, look back, accept when you've done something wrong, apologise for what you've done wrong, and then get on and make things better. Not to dwell on the past, not to dwell on things that have gone wrong with the people who've wronged you. Just accept things, be stronger for it, and move on. Photography is something I came to late in life, and it basically became a branch of my bird observing, if you like. I'm a self-confessed twitcher. I enjoy travelling around the country, seeking out new species and ticking them off in my book. But taking photos of birds, a whole new area of intrigue. Getting the bird to sit still while you line your camera up was the initial thing. For a while, all I wanted to do was photograph every bird there was that visits Australia. Now I'm trying to get photos of birds doing something interesting and unusual, capturing that unusual moment in their life, that moment in time that really catches the jizz of that bird. And you look and say, wow, what a great looking bird, what a great looking photo. And I've taken a few photos I'm proud of. I am getting better, and I'm getting the attention of fellow photographers. And that's quite pleasing. I get quite chuffed about that. One person who really stands out, though, was my late kendo sensei, Mr. Nagai. I came across Sensei Nagai in Little Bourke Street in Melbourne in 1979, 1980. And he was an old man of 61. And I was in my early 20s. And he was my first Japanese sensei or teacher. And the way he dispatched much younger people on the kendo floor, and the way he challenged me right up until he passed away in his 90s a few years ago, always inspired me, because he never gave me an easy ride. He always criticised my technique, criticised my teaching, criticised the way I ran our association for a short time. But at the end of the day, he really made me into a much better martial artist than I could ever have been. And he taught me that I could never be a Japanese sensei. But at the same time, he taught me to aspire to be as good as I possibly could and can be. So I use him as a role model in the sense that if I reach 90 and I'm still doing kendo and I'm still running the youngsters around the floor, like he used to do with me, then I'll be very pleased. I was challenged once. I was invited to attend a summer school in Saitama, north of Tokyo. And the title of the summer school was the Saitama School for Foreigners, foreign kendo players, if you like. A terrible name in translation. But basically every year, the All Japan Kendo Renmei invites a number of people from member countries to attend a 10-day intensive training. So I was chosen along with 2 other Australians to go on this particular year. And it was in July, which is the top of summer, middle of summer in Japan. And we trained 3 times a day. We started at 6 till 8. We had breakfast. We trained from 10 till 12. Then we trained from 2 till 4. And then we had lectures at 7 o'clock that night. And we had something like 6 eighth dan Japanese masters putting us through our hoops. And they pushed us so hard over those 10 days. Everybody from every country had blisters. Everybody was tired, everybody was aching. And at the end of the 10-day intensive summer school, we received a certificate to say we'd attended. Now, it's not the greatest looking certificate. It's not something I've put up on my wall. It's in a drawer at home. But it's an experience that I didn't think I was going to get through at one stage. First couple of days, I thought, what have I got myself into? Towards the end, I was doing the best looking kendo I'd ever done in my life. And I was spending my time in a dormitory with 8 other people from around the world, all from different countries. So we developed a real international understanding. We all knew blisters, we all knew pain, we all knew exhaustion. And that was probably the most difficult and most rewarding martial arts experience I've had. I do 5 martial arts at the moment, and it's very hard to do justice to all of them. But I'm still young. I have a lot of fun, and I really appreciate the friendships I've got with my martial arts students. Some of them, they all began as students, some of them have gone on to become colleagues. And that's rather special. So I like to think that they're very appreciative of what I've been able to help in the way of pointing them in the right direction. I think if you've got a martial arts club that's got a good group of senior people and a good president or sensei, if you like, running the organisation, then you've got something that people can relate to or can use to help their journey through life. But there's an awful lot of people who fall between the gaps, who just don't have that role model in life to help them get through, to bounce ideas off or just to show them the way to behave. So we need a lot more of that, I think. We need good leaders. And if you look at world politics at the moment, it's a little bit scary because there really aren't any that stand out. To make the world a better place, I would endeavour to give children, students, something real to look forward to. I think a feeling of self-worth goes a long way in making people feel good about themselves and positive about the world. the betterment of the individual, a positive activity that's going to benefit society. So while martial arts has taken some great steps forward as far as training, our understanding of how the body works, our mechanics, philosophically, I think a lot of the good, solid teachings of the martial arts of the 1960s and 70s, before they became popular as they are today, a lot of that has been lost. And I think that's detrimental to what martial arts should be. I'm very much into traditional martial arts. Each one has to be separated. And I don't like what's happened to the West, where someone with a limited amount of studying suddenly believes they can open their own dojo and start teaching their interpretation of their particular martial art. Because those places are invariably money-driven or ego-driven. I think the traditional Japanese martial arts have a very strong, positive structure about them. And the Kendo, the Iaido disciplines in particular, they don't have an individual who runs all. They don't have a grand master. So they have a very good structure where people train together, get graded together, and they reach the rank that they're able to achieve. Many karate systems, unfortunately, have broken down or fractured and splintered off to all sorts of groups, and those new groups invariably don't take the whole story with them, only the one page of the book that they've read, and they might scribble on a few more, but what they're teaching just lacks the depth and understanding that perhaps the original book was all about. My wife has been a great support with my martial arts. In the early days of our relationship and our marriage, she didn't really like what I was doing because it was taking me away from the home, away from the kids a little bit too much. But she always helped me adjust to the balance between being a father and being a martial artist, being a sensei and being a student. Each year, my wife and I go to the National Kendo Championships, which are held around Australia. We take our caravan and we make a week of it. And I'll train all day and I'll compete, and I'll come home and Glenda will be waiting. She'll have meals cooked, she'll have all sorts of things ready just to relax me and get me ready for the next day's competition. So in that, she's been extremely supportive. But I think the most important thing is that she taught me that not everybody intuitively is interested in martial arts. But she's also taught me that you can have an interest entirely of your own. You don't have to share it with your spouse, your partner, your best friend, but you can also support them in their pursuits. So I really learnt that from Glenda, that I can have my interest, she can have hers. We can share where appropriate, and if we can't, we just support each other as needed. So I'm in a really good place at the moment. I've been retired for 8 years. I've still got relative good health. So many things that I'm interested in doing. Travel's a big, important part of our lives together. I really enjoy travelling around Australia in our caravan, taking photos of... Started off with birds, but recently it's been whales and other animals. A few adventures over to other countries and places that we haven't seen yet. More photos of birds. But also, I always take my kendo and karate gear with me when we go overseas. So going into places in other countries that do martial arts and just joining and sharing what we do together, what we have in common, as opposed to concentrating on our differences. I'd like to do a lot more of that in the rest of my life. because you meet interesting people, like-minded people, and people you can learn positive things from.
If I were a magician and could really disappear, not a soul would notice, and none would shed a tear. If I were to vanish, it would bring no joy to an audience of no one, no witness to the void.